Global Network event series, which has previously welcomed innovative countries such as Singapore, Australia, Sweden, the UK, and of course, today, Canada. Before we start, I've been asked to provide you with a bit of an overview on the Smart Cities Global Network, SCGN itself. So the SCGN is an initiative of Smart Dubai, of the Dubai government, and is the first government-backed initiative that connects cities through a comprehensive platform for exchanging expertise and insights on fourth industrial revolution breakthroughs and the best mechanisms to build the happy, smart cities of the future. SCGN supports peer-to-peer learning, knowledge sharing, and open exchange of ideas, perspectives, and success stories in the fields of smart cities, emerging technologies, urban living, and sustainability. So SCGN currently has more than 600 members from 60 countries, and we hope more will join from Canada today. Members are from the public and private sectors, subject matter experts, academic institutes, media organizations, as well as students. So I would like to thank Smart Dubai and the SCGN for inviting Canada to be a partner on today's webinar to discuss the timely topic of connected communities. As you know, Canada's cities consistently rank among the happiest cities in the world. Cities like Vancouver, Montreal, and of course, Toronto, represented today by their Chief Technology Officer, Lawrence Etta. So in this webinar, we will explore together the latest approaches to designing people-centric connected communities. Particularly, we'll be looking at how technology is influencing citizen well-being and the social and economic impacts of connected cities. In addition, this webinar will showcase the latest innovations from Canada in digital health, AI, and citizen engagement. So we have an absolutely fantastic lineup of speakers that we're very proud of today, whom I will introduce at the time of their presentation. I would now like to introduce the welcome remarks for today's session delivered by His Excellency Younus Al Nasser, Assistant Director General at Smart Dubai and CEO of the Dubai Data Establishment.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Your Excellency Jean-Philippe, Consul General of Canada to Dubai and Northern Emirates, Your Excellency Lawrence Etta, Chief Technology Officer of the City of Toronto. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the team at Smart Dubai and our partners at the Consulate General of Canada in Dubai, I would like to welcome you today at today's webinar, where together we will explore the concepts and the development related to connected communities and share experiences and insights from both Dubai and Canada. I also thank our partners from the Smart Cities Global Network, the Canadian Business Council of Dubai, and the Canada Arab Business Council for their efforts to make today's virtual event a reality. The topic of connected communities and smart cities is gathering a considerable steam all around the world, and that is to be expected considering the rise of the advanced technologies that are now part of our nearly every aspect of our life. This is certainly a promises to a tremendous advantage for our communities everywhere, as long as these smart technologies are used with the people's best interest in mind. And with that in mind, the primary topic of our discussion today, where industries expert will be joining us to showcase what Dubai and Canada are doing to embrace these technologies in order to develop citizen-centric services and processes that seek first and foremost to make people's life easier and happier in the people-centric smart cities of the future. At Smart Dubai, formations making Dubai the happiest city on earth was the mandate given to us by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President, Prime Minister of UAE and the ruler of Dubai. Therefore, people's happiness has long been at the core of everything we do here in United Arab Emirates and Dubai. We never looked at technology as an objective in itself, but rather as a means to an end, and an instrument to streamline all procedures, transactions, services, and also to spread their happiness among Dubai's citizens, residents, and visitors. This is the biggest ambition that we are forward-looking to. And in addition to these broad topics, today's discussion will go further into details, exploring the social and economic impact of connected cities, discussing concepts of digital equity and digital inclusion. We will also be showcasing innovations and breakthroughs in various sectors such as digital health, artificial intelligence, and citizens engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to leave the floor from our colleagues over here, whom have a great agenda ahead of us that will be presented, and I will look forward to a great insights and eye-opening discussion we will be having. So thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for kicking off our event. I'd now like to turn it over to His Excellency Jean-Philippe Planto, Consul General of Canada to Dubai and the Northern Emirates.
Good afternoon, bonjour, assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Excellency Younus Al Nasser, for those kind words. It's a pleasure for Canada to join Smart Dubai in this webinar under the auspices of the Smart Cities Global Network on the topic of connected communities. I'm so thrilled to see many Canadian organizations and people that are involved in this session today, Canadian Business Council of Dubai and the Canada Arab Business Council, but also our distinguished speakers from the City of Toronto, TELUS, NXN, OpenText, and the ICTC in Canada. I'd like also to highlight the role of the Trade Commissioner Service at the Consulate General of Canada, which is there to bring everybody together in a venue like today. The participation of these organizations and the interest that Dubai generates in Canada is really a testament of the special relationship that exists already between our two countries. But if you've joined us today, you may want to hear a bit more about Canada's approach to smart cities and what are some of the parallels that our countries and cities have with the innovative city of Dubai. So when I talk about Canada's secret, you know, our special powers, as I call them, I talk about three main ingredients. I talk about our people, I talk about our partnerships, and our performance. On people first, we have the best educated workforce in the OECD and Canada, right? So that educated workforce is at the core of the innovation that we have in Canada. We have some of the top universities for science technologies, such as the University of Toronto, Waterloo, McGill, and many others that rank very high in the top university lists globally. And Canada used to suffer from brain drain, and mostly to our neighbors to the south, but no more. Now Canada experiences brain gain because we have an immigration system that is designed and focused on bringing the talent that Canada needs to continue to innovate and stay ahead in that race, the global race for the next, to remain competitive. So that's about our people. The second is about our partnership. And, you know, Canada is strengthening its position as a global hub thanks to its public-private partnerships. We have government support, that's the overlay, and this is very similar to what you'll see in Dubai. Government support to the digital economy, and then colleges and universities and businesses collaborating together to make innovative breakthroughs. Canada is home to 42 business incubators affiliated with 96 post-secondary institutions. That connection is happening at the earliest stage of business formation. Today, Canada's tech sector is the largest spender in R&D, largest investor in R&D. And these investments have resulted in Canada's position as a world leader in AI, for example. The Toronto-Waterloo region corridor is the second largest technology cluster in North America, and I'm sure Lawrence will refer to that. There's over 20,000 companies in the ecosystem, including over 5,000 startups. We have Ryerson University Digital Media Zone that's ranked the best university incubator in the world. So many examples of these partnerships leading to innovation. And the third part is demonstrated performance. It's how Canada has had such a success in attracting the world's best tech companies. In fact, 10 out of the 10 of the world's largest innovation. And the third part is demonstrated performance. It has had such a success in attracting the world's best companies. In fact, 10 out of the 10 of the world's largest companies have a presence in Canada. I'm talking about the Amazon, the Apple, Facebook, Samsung, and others. Twitter announced an expansion of its engineering. These are engineering presences, right? R&D. Twitter announced an expansion of its engineering hub in Canada last week. But we're also very proud of our homegrown successes. And these include industry leaders like Shopify or OpenText and TELUS, all of whom have a presence in Dubai. And Canadian startups as well. So these are more established companies, but startups as well have done very well, including by winning prestigious government competition, including the World Government Summit here in Dubai, where some Canadian startups have been chosen as the key enablers of that innovation that we talked about. So my team and I are here to help you make connections for our friends in the UAE, make connections to our Canadian digital technology ecosystem. And on that note, I really look forward to the session today and to the follow-up that will happen after. Danielle.
Thank you, Consul General, for this high-level preface on Canada as an innovation nation to set the stage for our discussion today. So next on the agenda is our keynote from Mr. Lawrence Etta, Chief Technology Officer of the City of Toronto. Over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Daniela, and thank you very much to Smart Dubai, Smart Cities Global Network, the Canadian Business Council. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for the introduction, Your Excellency, and also thank you to the Consul General of Canada in representing our country. If we move to the next slide, please. And so my name is Lawrence Etta, the Chief Technology Officer, and I'm going to take us through a journey of Toronto as a connected community. The next slide, please. This imagery depicts the diversity and inclusion of our city. There's some key moments here in some of the major milestones, and all captivated by our Toronto Raptors for those of us who are sports fans. But the essence of this picture is to show that Toronto is a diverse and a multicultural city. And through my presentation, I will express how that is interconnected with a connected community. We'll move to the next slide, please. So the Toronto region, as the Consul General of Canada spoke about, is built around a highly educated workforce and diverse economy that is well positioned to become a hub and global leader for connected community and smart city initiatives. Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world. As of 2016, 51.5% of the residents of the city proper belong to a visible minority group. According to the Canadian government, Toronto has the highest per capita immigration rate in the world. Within Canada itself, 43% of all new immigrants to Canada settle in the Greater Toronto Area, adding significantly to Toronto's population. According to recent census, over 50% of the residents of Toronto are foreign born. Just some brief highlights of stats. We have 70 plus incubators and accelerators and over 220 plus investors and funding agencies. We have the highest concentration of startups outside of Silicon Valley. On a talent pool, over 7 million people, and we have 150 languages spoken in the Greater Toronto Area. 1.5 million jobs with 500,000 located in the downtown Toronto core. We have 13 colleges and universities with 400,000 plus students. On the business and technology concentration, nearly 300,000 technology workers, approximately 20% greater than the number of total tech workers in San Francisco. Toronto was named the fastest growing tech market by various research statistics. On diversity and culture, Toronto region is home to some of the most prominent museums, art galleries in North America. If we move to the next slide, please. So the city of Toronto has focused on certain priorities. Our strategic priorities are around keeping the financial sustainability of our city, how well we're running the city, how we maintain and creating housing that creates affordability, how we keep Toronto moving through our transportation and our infrastructure, and how we invest in the people and neighborhoods, and also ensuring that climate change and resiliency is a key component. We do this across three pillars: our people, so the culture within our workforce; our partnership, working with the private sector, the academia, and various other not-for-profits group; and also performance, so that the City of Toronto, the public, our taxpayers recognize that we are using their dollars appropriately to deliver services. We'll go to the next slide, please. So we are talking about how Toronto can be a digital and equitably connected community. As I mentioned earlier, it is certainly truly an honor to be part of the Canada Smart City Dubai event today. I do know that the Smart Cities Global Network is an outstanding virtual ecosystem of like-minded thinkers and innovators around the world. I had the fortunate privilege to visit Dubai in 2019 at the AI Intelligence Conference and was extremely impressed by what I saw in the city. In Toronto, of course, the term Smart City was coined by a business as a branding tool, and it has now taken a role in technology and governance in the world. At the City of Toronto, we recognize how Smart City is used, but we have pivoted to focus on connected community, which is more closely aligned with our work. In a nutshell, Toronto's Connected Community program is about using process, data, and technology to enhance the quality of life for Torontonians, not so much unlike the approach that Dubai is walking towards, a happier city in the world. To us in Toronto, Connected Community is about delivering broader value, cutting across silos, developing the hearing from engaged staff, citizens, and residents. We believe Connected Community is not just about technology, but a way of working. Connected Community is about shifting the mindset and the work culture to solve problems, to deliver service for the city equitably, not just the individual service. Toronto's Connected Work focuses on Toronto's priorities, as I mentioned: financial sustainability, housing, mobility, running the city well, investing in people, neighborhoods, climate change, and building resilience. Next slide, please. The digital vision. Overall in Toronto, it's a simple one. We want to build a connected and equitable Toronto with affordable, accessible, and resilient environment as a public service for everybody. In January 20, the City Toronto Council, our elected officials, directed city staff in terms of creating a digital infrastructure plan. That plan had a number of policies which will regulate specific topics related to digital infrastructure to ensure that there's a close cohesion in terms of policy and planning in the management of infrastructure. Toronto is currently building on existing policies to develop that digital infrastructure plan that will allow us to serve and outwards in a tool to ensure the external proposals presented to Toronto contain a digital element. It will help us guide our day-to-day as well as our long-term decisions related to digital infrastructure. There were 5 working principles that were adopted: equity and inclusion, well-run city, social, economic, and environmental benefits, privacy and security, democracy, and transparency. I would like to focus on the equity and inclusion because it speaks to City of Toronto's digital infrastructure being used to create and sustain equity, inclusion, accessibility, and human rights in its operations and outcomes. This principle of equity and inclusion is guiding us in taking action and was certainly realized in the current COVID-19 pandemic. If we move to the next slide, please. On digital equity, access to the internet is becoming an essential tool around the globe for participation in a modern democratic society. However, broadband can only deliver benefits to those who can connect to it, afford it, and know how to use it. By this measure, broadband is still far from a universal service in cities across the world, and Toronto is no different. The gaps are especially pronounced for Black, Indigenous, and people of color households, and our research has also shown that there is a substantial gap based on income and educational attainment. Access to the internet is increasingly recognized by countries and organizations around the world as an essential tool for participation in a modern democratic society. So Toronto is committed to reducing this to bridge the digital divide. This approach also means the city will be in a more empowered position to ensure essential services are delivered to the public as part of the business community. If we move to the next slide, please. So the city is looking in terms of how do we utilize our own existing assets, the fiber assets, our right-of-way, our pole, using those assets to generate revenue opportunities, continuing as a technology leader, and more importantly, complementing with our private-public sector. We need our private-public sector to contribute in terms of bridging that digital design. Next slide, please. We know from research that some of Torontons are being left behind, so we have put together a program called ConnectTO. It's to expand the high-speed internet access for underserved Torontos. It's to look for partnership opportunities in a code development, and it's to leverage the city's municipal assets, our fiber, our buildings, our right-of-way, to create a citywide high-speed internet that connects underserved communities by providing access to city fiber at a fair price to unlock public asset value. We'll move to the next slide, please. So as we bridge that equity and we bridge that viewpoint to have our economic recovery and the long-term fiscal health, Toronto is solidifying its position as an innovation and technology leader by enabling future and emerging technologies in the ecosystem. I want to move to the final slide. I would like to thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you and supporting Smart Dubai. Like Dubai, Toronto is committed to improve the quality of life for our residents through technology, data, and process. Digital transformation must be rooted in true digital equity so we can all have a level playing field for the mutual and sustained prosperity. Thank you very much, and I look forward to listening to my other colleagues on the speaker series.
Thank you, Lawrence. We appreciate your continued engagement with Dubai, and having been here before, we hope to have you back in Dubai one day very soon. I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Ali Azzawi, City Experience Advisor from Smart Dubai, who will speak to us about how digital technologies influence citizen well-being. Dr. Ali.
Assalamu alaikum, and good afternoon, good morning, and greetings to everybody around the world. It's certainly my pleasure to be involved in this collaborative dissemination of expertise by all the parties involved, and also, of course, at a wider scale. Next slide, please. The digital well-being of people is obviously a key element, as His Excellency Younus Al-Nasser pointed out. Happiness, in other words, well-being of people is of paramount for us in the UAE and, of course, in Dubai. And what we'll talk about just now is how we see specifically digital technology affecting well-being. Next. We'll talk about, first of all, what well-being is and what digital technology is. Just a matter of hygiene, just to be specific about what is meant by these. And then we'll talk about the definition of well-being, and then the factors that influence them, that hold that space of digital well-being, and then specifically influences. Next. To be clear, that this what I'll be demonstrating or talking about this session is something that was part of the policy that was launched by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, the Vice President, Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai, that was launched in January this year. The Digital Wellbeing Council is actually led by Sheikh Saif bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and with the Vice President being Hassan Bouhmed, Minister of Community Development. And of course, His Excellency Younus Al-Nasser is a member of this council. Next. So specifically, what is well-being and digital technology? Next. We have to be really clear that all of this discussion is about well-being, meaning that the happiness of people in the city or in a community. So for us, well-being is a very clear understanding that underpinned our initiatives towards improving the happiness in the city. So specifically, we don't talk about defining happiness, but we talk about the needs of citizens in a community or in a city. And that allows the conversation to be more pragmatic and achievable, frankly. So when you talk about emotional needs or basic needs or even deeper needs, then every initiative can then be allocated to serve each of these needs. I won't elaborate too much on this because this is not the topic of this presentation, but just suffice to say that well-being is at the heart of this discussion and how technology affects it. Next, please. So digital technology then, what is meant by that? So for clarity, we would count digital technology as one that uses electronic means to generate, store, process data or information for various purposes, contexts such as economic, learning, leisure, and health, and so on. So for the purpose of providing a function or a tool. And these tools or functions could be services, productivity, accessing or consuming content, and so on. So that is clearly what we mean by digital technology. So how does that set of technology tools and functions affect well-being? This is what we're talking about. Next, please. Next one. So how could we define digital well-being? So I won't elaborate on this particular slide, but that is the full definition that is available in the policy. And the following slides will be elaborating on each part. But suffice to say that the first paragraph here is digital well-being may be defined as the extent that digital technology influences a person's well-being in various life contexts in both positive and negative ways, and the person's ability to identify and understand the type of influences. And we'll go through the details of that in the following slides. Next, please. And that definition can be represented graphically as layers of influence upon a person's well-being, and we'll go through each of these boxes. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, the next one. Okay, so when we say the factors, first of all, context. That's right. So when we talk about context, what we are talking about really is the purpose and the way that somebody is using technology, as well as the domain that they are using them in. So for example, the user interface itself can be the context that we are referring to, or the behavior and the way that somebody is going through a task, but also at the wider scale of life domains. And of course, this is very relevant to a city. Next, please. This is a very, very important point that underpins the whole of the digital well-being for people in the city. So in general, when somebody talks about ethics, it's essentially talking about the concepts of right and wrong. But for information technology, then the question is, regarding information and technology, what are the rights and wrongs in that respect? And clearly, of course, not only the person, him or herself, that is responsible, but service providers of digital technologies, be it internet providers or other providers, as we've seen many examples of large and small organizations and companies being held accountable for the way that they run their companies and what they do with the data in terms of privacy and access to information and so on. So clearly, this is an important part. And in fact, actually, you'll see in Smart Dubai's Dubai Data Organization, there are very much specific tools to guide the way that AI ethics, for example, are handled. And that's related very directly to this topic here. Next, please. Lawrence just mentioned the digital divide, and this is a very strong point in regards to digital literacy. And this is essentially about many aspects, which we'll go through the definition itself, but digital literacy is one that contributes to the digital divide in a strong way. So, for example, to what extent does a person appreciate, understand, use new concepts? What are the implications of these concepts with regards to the use? So for somebody who doesn't know that posting something on a social media platform where other people can grab information from that, this is obviously going to affect the way.
As access to the internet is increasingly recognized, as I mentioned, in terms of a modern democratic society, Toronto is very much focused on bridging that digital divide. And technology is a key enabler to make that happen. If we go to the next slide, please. So if we look at some statistics that was done, 38% of households report that the download speeds right now, in terms of what has been set in our country, and the cost to afford those speeds are very challenging. 34% of those households are worried about paying their home internet bills over the next few months. So we as a city has decided to take action. We'll move to the next slide, please. In the Canadian context, cities are uniquely positioned to leverage public assets for public good. The approach will the City of Toronto to augment internet service offerings to all neighborhoods across the city to bridge the digital divide. This approach also means the city will be in a more empowered position to ensure essential service.
So it's not just a functional thing of how to use technology, but there is this broader awareness of technology and its media. So it's not just a functional point here. So the EU's digital competency framework talks about literacy in the sense that somebody might be, the extent that somebody is confident or critical and responsible, having responsible use and engagement with digital technologies for learning at work and for participation in society. As Lawrence mentioned a minute ago, inclusion in society and feeling a sense of engagement is obviously going to be important in this respect. Next, please. So the influencers are, what are they? The very basic level of the influencer is the operational and direct. And Lawrence mentioned connectivity as a primary one. Absolutely it is. Many happiness studies have pointed out that a big marker of happiness scores in cities and countries is the extent that they're connected to the internet. Simple as that. So it's a very direct way of influencing people's well-being when they've got a good quality internet. Let's go to the next slide, please. So an operational level of influences is something that is related to direct use of technology. So the usability, for example, accessibility and security. So connectivity, I just mentioned, accessibility and inclusivity. Again, these are primary factors which are very direct. You can measure them very directly and so on. Usability, so if somebody provides a service and that service is not very easily used, causing frustrations, especially with somebody who doesn't have a good level of digital literacy, as I mentioned earlier, then that's going to be affecting their the quality of their engagement. I see you appearing, Danielle. Are you timing? I'll rush up. That's actually on the last two slides. Novel level of influences are things which are new to us. The next slide, please. So new functions that are not humanely natural. So things that we've had to learn. There are new concepts, social networks, digital identity. So the idea of logging in on a particular service, logging on, having different digital identities, this is new. And therefore we've had to learn that. It's not natural. So people who have not come across this and not learned their way through will suffer from this. And that'll cause frustration and worries, and sometimes people will do very drastic things themselves. Next slide. And the next one, please. So the final one is the indirect or the emerging factors. And these are extremely important, but very intangible. Things like privacy. We all know privacy actually affects the way that we deal with technology. But how do you deal with that? How you can't point at it, but definitely it's there. Well, there are regulations and policies and so on, trust and ethics and so on like that. These are the factors that are indirect influences to well-being. So the final slide, please. So that then brings the whole thing into a formalized picture where there are layers to consider in how people's well-being is affected by digital technologies. So many thanks once again for the opportunity. I hope this was clear. And I look forward to the rest of the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, for sharing Dubai's experience and expertise. This was a very interesting presentation. Thanks. So next on our agenda, we have an armchair discussion between Sharb Al-Ghannoum, who's Senior Director at TELUS, and Ghazi Atallah, who's CEO of NXN. The title of the discussion is going to be The Digital Health Journey and Population Wellness Through the Smart Initiatives Lens.
Thank you, Danielle. Your Excellencies, thank you for the invite and for making this webinar possible. I'm truly privileged to be joining this amazing panel of subject matter experts, and truly lucky to be following Dr. Ali after he shed the light on many very important key points that really tie in intimately to what we're about to talk about. Now, obviously, it's going to be a challenge to keep Ghazi and myself down to 10 minutes. I guess it's going to be probably the only time we're going to be talking for only 10 minutes. However, we'll do our best. Let me delegate this to technology, actually, to make sure that we fit in the time. I'm not gonna do an advertisement for TELUS. I'm part of TELUS for the past 16 years now, and we've been on a mission to try and contribute to creating better outcomes in the health and wellness of the population here in Canada. And this journey started back in 2009 when we founded TELUS Health. Now, His Excellency Younus spoke about the fact that technology is not an objective but a medium. And as a telco, we're really good at moving data. That's really what we were set out to do. And Dr. Ali mentioned the fact that quality of connectivity has a direct influence on the happiness of population. And we're truly glad to have one. That technology is not an objective but a medium. And as a telco, we're really good at moving data. That's really what we were set out to do. And Dr. Ali mentioned the fact that quality of connectivity has a direct influence on the happiness of population. And we're truly glad to have one of the best-in-class networks here in Canada. And it's nothing strange to the Dubai brothers, given that they have also a world-class. It's not so long ago by the international community. And so when we started that journey, our focus was on, as we look at the construct of the health systems around the globe today, the construct is made to treat you when you are sick. So it's kind of a reactive construct. And what we attempted to do through technology is to really try and enable the well-being of the population outside the hospital, on their device, in the comfort of their homes. And when we were going through that journey, really look at digital health from one side, and later on, if you would have seen in the news on the agricultural technology side, we felt that all of this needs to tie in together in the form of a platform, of a greater platform that impacts many aspects of the lives of the population. And when we went on a quest to seek a robust partner that would help us accomplish that mission, and that mission being creating smarter cities, we obviously turned to one of the bedrocks of innovation around the globe, to Dubai, and found a Dubai organization such as NXN to help us really build that ecosystem. So maybe I'll hand it over to you, Ghazi, to elaborate a little further on NXN's mission before we had the next.
Thank you, Sharbel, and thank you all for the opportunity. My name is Ghazi Atallah. I'm the CEO of NXN, and we are specialized in smart cities and connected communities. And we have the privilege really to be out of Dubai, working with key cities across the region, including, of course, the showcase that Dubai is, but also Abu Dhabi and Riyadh. And also having the privilege of working with TELUS in Canada and trying to promote and provide smart city solutions across Canada together with TELUS as a partnership. So it's a two-way partnership, which is really exciting. bringing expertise from Dubai into Canada and bringing technology from Canada into the region. So it's a nice partnership in terms of being able to bring the best of both worlds. So we're very excited to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. We're going to talk about one of the key topics that I think Sharbel would love to talk about in a minute or so. So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. If you might, please jump two slides. So one more, please. Thank you. So I'm not going to state the obvious around the pandemic and what the pandemic triggered. What I want to say is really we've been working on platforms with like-minded operators and partners around the globe, but also specifically here in Canada. And the first reflex that the pandemic triggered, and that was back in March of 2020, where we started really thinking about what do we do next? And there was kind of two aspects. What do we do through the pandemic? But most importantly, what do we do as this pandemic will get in control, as we could see around the globe right now? And hopefully really soon we could reintegrate properly. But that really raised those questions, like how do we go back to life safely? Most importantly, safely. And what can technology play as a role in helping us go back to work, go back to social activities, go back to travel? So specifically on back to work, one example was where we needed to pivot quite fast to really ensure leveraging technology to collect valuable data to help employees and professionals reintegrate their work environment where need be in a safe manner and really contain any potential outbreaks. And the key term here is, the intent here is not to rip and replace. We did not go on a spree trying to rip and replace existing technologies, existing infrastructures to try and implement a smarter infrastructure, but rather really utilize what's already existing and add those layers of analytics and insight and data collection into a platform. And I'll go back to Dr. Ali's point around insecurity. This platform that we created was really privacy by design and security by design, recognizing that we will be handling sensitive data, which is general population data and health data, patient data. And so we really turned our focus towards working on use cases with organizations, with enterprise, and with the public sector, and with the small and medium enterprise to help them reintegrate work environments safely through utilizing technology.
And same thing, Sharbel, for social activities and for travel. So, it's one of the most important things that we want to do as we get back to life, as we say, after the pandemic, is how do we get back to social activities safely? And what would technology play a role in doing that in terms of social distancing and being able to comply with the rules and regulations and being able to actually enjoy life, whether it's going to school, going shopping, or sports, or what have you. And what would the technology and the platform contribute to do? We talk about also travel and some new travel protocols, like a digital passport and a passport that contains information about you in terms of vaccination, what have you. So what will be those new travel protocols? And what would technology do, and what role would it play to ensure that we actually are able to get back to some kind of normality, both from a social and travel point of view? Next slide, please.
Yeah, so the digital transformation journey is something that's really, really exciting. And we've been witnessing it in many cities and many environments over the past. And I believe that we've learned a lot of lessons. And now we broke this into a methodology in our environment where we focus on digitizing, optimizing, and then exchanging. And most importantly, we recognize that just turning assets to digital assets is not necessarily the end goal of a digital transformation, because once an asset is turned digital, it remains siloed. And we require a certain optimization between those assets in order to really create or start the foundation of an ecosystem. And that's really where we've been turning our focus into not only digitizing assets. So again, like as a silly example, an in-person doctor clinical visit how do we turn it into a virtual doctor visit? And that would be the first step in digitizing the process. But then how do we optimize this and link it to e-prescription platforms, as an example, or applications? How do we link it to lab tests and referrals and scheduling, etc.? And so digitize, then optimize, and I'll let Ghazi elaborate maybe on exchanging.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, so that's the fundamental horizontal capability that we encourage cities to work on. It's the exchange, it's the platform, as they say, and the ability to basically create an ecosystem. First of all, create the platform that enables you to provide, the basis of any digital transformation. So things like digital identity, very good examples in Canada and here in Dubai. Digital location, so location as a service, providing access to data to those that should have access to that type of data, of course. And then, enabling lots of interesting technologies on top of that, like AI and others. So and when we talk to cities, this is really the fundamental horizontal capability. That platform will enable, digitizing, optimizing, and delivering the right services. And you create an ecosystem of partners around that platform. So you can create then not only services around health, as Sharbel is talking about, but also services around social benefits. We're talking about travel, transport, et cetera, et cetera. So the exchange or the platform, which is a fundamental element of transformation, and where we and TELUS spend a lot of time on, and we have a lot of experience in, that's the idea of that really the key functions that a city should look at in terms of transformation.
Yeah, and on that note, my watch buzzed and Danielle just showed up. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity of sharing some thoughts with you. Looking forward for further collaboration between.
Very much, Sharbel and Ghazi, for this very rich discussion. It's great to see TELUS's growing activities in this region, using Dubai as a hub for your activities. So this is great in partnership with NXN, of course. So next up, I'd like to introduce Mr. Fadi Hnain, Vice President, Middle East at OpenText, which is Canada's largest software company. Fadi is going to be talking to us about citizen engagement and artificial intelligence for the public sector. Over to you, Fadi.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Good morning, good afternoon, assalamu alaikum, bonjour. My name is Fadi Hnain. I'm Vice President for OpenText in the Middle East. I'm based in Dubai, covering the region. Next slide, please. So the topic today is citizen engagement in the public sector. I'm sure I'll try to be on time. I think we're running a little bit behind, and I promise that I'll finish before Danielle appears on my screen. So next slide, please. So OpenText, information is the currency of the digital economy. I think everybody agrees to that. We have been, in the last few years, in the last maybe decade, we have generated more information than ever before in the history of mankind. This information is very difficult to manage. We don't know what it contains. Sometimes it's useless, sometimes it's very valuable, sometimes we need to protect, sometimes we need to keep forever, sometimes we don't know what to do with it. So this this information, we need to manage it in a way that can drive value and provide services in general to the citizen as well as to the enterprise. Next slide, please. Can you move 4 times or 6 until the end? Yeah, thank you. Bringing the information in a citizen-centric approach. We've had a lot of projects in the region. We've had projects across the world. Something is repetitive. Something is coming all the time. And you've seen it from Ghazi, from Sharbel, from Dr. Ali, presentations. We need to give the citizen the center stage in terms of delivering these services. We need to give them the choice of interacting the way they want, the device they want, the interface they want. This is very important. Once we go into the digital services, the digital should be full digital. It cannot be halfway, and we need to build the trust. And some of the studies mentioned that trust is built, of course, when we build the trust in the government, we build as well happiness in the citizen and more satisfaction. So trust is very important. Being able to identify the citizen quickly and across multiple services. Why do we need to identify them? Because we need to customize the service. The service need to be presented to them based on their profile and provide transparency in terms of what information we disclose and what information they can access and what they cannot access, and ultimately resulting in the satisfaction of the citizen, which in Dubai was, for me, it was quite innovative when they announced the happiness index in Dubai. So happiness will be the ultimate goal in this journey for the citizen-centric approach of digital services. Next slide, please. So the pillars for the digital government, I think you've seen it before. The agencies from one side, which is the government, citizens on the other side. Agencies, absolutely the important things is the inter-government collaboration, and you will be surprised that sometimes and very often this communication and inter-government collaboration do not exist. Providing the services based on a shared services model. Why? Because they would be able to roll out these services and reuse some components into other agencies, into other government, other entities. And of course, the orchestration of the information flow, which we do exactly. I mean, this is very important because the information that you gather and the orchestration of this information flow needs to happen in the context of the transaction, in the context of the profile of the customer, the context of what's going on or what's happening, or what kind of services is being delivered. On the citizen side, they expect the digital identity, which is secure, identified once, no need to identify yourself multiple times, absolutely the confidentiality and ways of ensuring confidentiality of the information, and providing as well the omni-channel, which is interaction through different channels and different interactions and different interfaces. So what we provide is something related to the technology. We provide the platform, the technology, the software to enable the strategy and the vision that prior to that, the companies or the government or the consultant has put forward and want to implement and execute. Next slide, please. 3 more clicks. Okay, so from the citizen-focused digital services, you have to keep in mind that the citizen are comparing even the government with the best enterprise in the world. So if I'm going to Amazon, if I'm going to Noon, if I'm going to Apple, I'm getting a service, I'm getting to my bank. I mean, this is the service I would expect. And not all the banks, by the way, are good. But you have to envision like a very good enterprise with very good service. And then the citizen are constantly comparing the services they're getting from an enterprise to the service they will get from their government. So the consent is one of the key components. Having a regulatory framework to protect the privacy, to protect the information, I think that's been covered already. Having the control, I need to know what's been collected about me. I need to know how I can change that, not modify that, but not create a new information, but at least correct if there's any correction to be done. I am faced with a challenge during a digital service, during providing the service to me. I need to understand and get an update. I need to get the information, what kind of document, what kind of information do I need to provide? And then, of course, the convenience, again, of a single password, simple enrollment, and then the interface of choice that I need to interact with. So next slide, please. And 3 or 4 more clicks. Yes, and 1 more. Yeah, thank you. So, and as a digital service and digital initiative, some people do not realize, we realize it because that's what we do every day. 80% of the information resides in unstructured content. 80% of the content is unstructured. So you don't have structured means I have my information in a database, I have it in a CRM, I have it in an ERP, but 80% of the information, either a backlog or historical information or even new information, reside in unstructured content. And that makes the challenge of making sense out of this unstructured content. If you want to move forward, you need to establish a digital service, but what would you do with the backlog, with the information that you gathered over many, many years, and sometimes maybe 100 years? So the paper, and I think the Dubai is a leader in that process and in that vision, the anatomy of a paperless service or a paperless government in general. And we have at different stages interacted with companies and government. They have a different maturity level. And the first thing they do initially is to get rid of the paper processes. And there are different ways of doing that. But of course, there is automated way where you can essentially capture the information on the paper, images, and then store it based on a record management, on a categorization, and then make sense out of it later on in using AI and content analytics and sentiment analysis. Next slide, please. So open text approach in digital government, absolutely the citizen centricity, standardization of processes so they can be reused across multiple government or agencies, accelerator to accelerate the adoption as well as the rollout of the service when it is needed, an extremely tight governance model to provide trust, to provide transparency, and then increase the satisfaction and the happiness of the constituent. Uniform UX, where you can interact the way you want, the interface you want, and more important, the data insight. Once you gather all this information, when you have a single repository, when you have a single vision of the truth, how you can make sense out of all this information. Next, please. Of course, Canada government relies on open text in many ways. On the federal government, we have a couple of examples in the Middle East as well. This slide is for the government who accepted to be a reference for us and who can share the experiences with you and with anybody who needs to be to share the information. Next, please. And some of the projects we have done in the region. And next, if you don't mind. And data could be used for good use, and we help some non-profit organization as well drive insight and value out of the information they gather over the years. Next, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for organizing this webinar.
Thank you very much, Fadi. Now I'd like to thank you, Fadi. Thanks again. So now I'd like to turn it over to Fawn Rice, Senior Research and Policy Analyst at the Information and Communications Council of Canada, and Mairead Matthews, Research and Policy Analyst. So Fawn and Mairead are going to talk to us about responsible innovation in Canada and beyond, and understanding and improving the social impacts of technology. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having us here today. Can we go to the first slide, please? Thank you so much. So as Danielle said, we're here to talk about a recent study, Responsible Innovation in Canada and Beyond, Understanding and Improving the Social Impacts of Technology. And we're really honored to be here today. Thanks so much for having us. So I'm here from the Information and Communications Technology Council, which is a national center of expertise on Canada's digital economy. And this study that we're talking about was part of a larger study commissioned by the Government of Canada to understand some of the emerging technology ecosystems in Canada. And this one focuses a lot on digital wellness, a lot of the other topics that the panelists here have discussed today. So if we can move to the next slide. Thank you so much. So this is the why study the social impact of technologies. And this has been covered really effectively by a lot of the other presentations. Across different types of technology, we see rapid change. We can see some unanticipated impacts at scale once they are deployed. Unique intersections between technology and human behavior those novel consequences talked about in the digital wellness presentation, that re-entrench inequalities. For example, in the City of Toronto's presentation, the digital divide was covered really effectively there, or create power imbalances. And we can think about this in terms of all types of technology, but for the context of this presentation, we'll be thinking about it with regard to smart cities specifically. Next slide, please. So for this study, we did an extensive set of semi-structured interviews with thought leaders in the space in Canada and around the world who are working to improve the social impacts of technology. And some of the common things we found were 6 common principles that people tried to think through when working to improve technology's social impact. So here we have anticipation, so trying to think about the unanticipated consequences of a tool. Inclusion and diversity, and this has been a key theme here today, I think, who is represented at the table. And this is something that can really help with that anticipation, because if you have more voices at the table, you might have more diverse voices anticipating more diverse potential outcomes of the tool you're developing. Interdisciplinarity and collaboration, a very similar theme. So what would other disciplines, sectors, and stakeholders do differently? Justice and fairness. So we may have diverse voices at the table, but are they all being heard equally? Are we addressing kind of historic imbalances and inequities? Self-awareness and reflexivity. So considering what might my own position, background, and ideas be preventing me from seeing? What experiences am I bringing to the table that impact my choices? And then agency and choice. So when we're creating a tool or deploying a tool, are users or adopters able to meaningfully opt in or out? Next slide, please. So thinking about all of these different common principles, in this study, we really wanted to focus on the fact that the responsibility for improving the social impacts of technology is not limited to designers and developers, because even though there's significant responsibility there, the discussion often really focuses on that and ignores the different strategies that many different stakeholders can bring to the table. So in taking a look at different types of stakeholders in this ecosystem, I'm going to focus on the first half, and the users half, before turning it over to my colleague. We have adopters, and these can be mediators, people deploying a technology in a community, working with early upstream public engagement and education to try to improve the impact of those technologies. We have consumers who are not limited to voting with their wallet. There are lots of other agenda setting, activism style or community organizing activities that consumers can engage in. And here we can think of something as simple as a hackathon, for example, to creatively solve a problem. And we have groups and individuals. And the reason we make that distinction is because we think a lot about individual rights, such as privacy rights, but we also have group rights, collective rights. So for example, a Canadian example, there's something called OCAP, which is a trademark of the First Nations Information Government Center. Their website's down at the bottom of that slide if you'd like to learn more. And that stands for Ownership, Control, Access, and Protection. And it's a trademark and a set of principles coined to think about the collective privacy rights and the collective data ownership rights of First Nations in Canada. And that set of principles actually holds data collectors to a higher set of standards than Canadian privacy law. So this is a really interesting way we can think about communities and the impact of data and privacy on those communities in some ways to make sure that we're kind of repatriating data that we're collecting to those groups. I'm going to pass it off to Mairead.
Thanks so much, Fawn. Next slide, please. So the last 3 stakeholders that I'm going to talk about is regulators, investors, and innovators, and I'll just speak about those briefly. I know we're short on time, so I'll try to cut my time a bit short. And the first one is regulators. So regulators, perhaps unsurprisingly, focus on policy and regulation, which is a process that takes place to raise the floor of innovation. So we can think about setting like the mandatory minimum requirements that's needed for safe innovation. And you can think about anything as abstract as privacy and competition law to something more tangible, such as environmental standards or building codes. And regulation is very important in smart city work, which largely happens in the public domain and in close collaboration with public actors. His Excellency Jean-Philippe Linteau spoke about this earlier. In Canada, there's a great prominence of public-private partnerships in smart city work. And one really great example of regulation in smart city work, it has to do with privacy, which has been spoken about a lot today. So in some jurisdictions in Canada, certain kinds of data are deemed, personal data, I should say, are deemed highly sensitive, have to be stored within Canada. So if you look at Canadian smart city RFPs, or sometimes with the federal government, you'll see public sector partners ask private sector partners things like how and where are you storing your data, what are the privacy implications, or they may have a requirement like this data must be stored in Canada. And I'm sure some of the private sector partners on this call are quite familiar with that. So moving on to investors, before I talk about the role of investors, I just want to mention one crucial thing about these 6 categories that we're presenting is they're not mutually exclusive. So they describe an action and not an actor. And this is because in the smart cities world, many stakeholders wear many hats. So a great example is governments, for example, they create policy and regulation, but they also do a lot of investing in the form of tax credits or loans and grants, and even procurement. And when they're not building, when they're building tech in-house as opposed to buying a product or service, they're actually acting as innovators themselves. So because of this, ethical investing takes many forms. VC firms do this if they're asking a startup about their environmental impact or their approach to privacy or diversity. And governments do the same when they're tying these kinds of concepts to tax credits, funding programs, or procurement. And again, in smart cities work in Canada, RFPs will often include things like what measures has your company taken to reduce its environmental impact, or how do you plan on consulting with residents, or what does diversity look like in your organization's ownership or management teams. So finally, I'll just touch quickly on the role of innovators, which is twofold. When I spoke about the policy side of things, I talked about raising the floor of innovation, and on the other side of the spectrum, technologists who endeavor in tech for good create solutions that raise the ceiling of innovation. So they go above and beyond what is required, and they actually generate positive improvement. And this has been talked a lot about in the various presentations. Our smart city work is making citizens happier. Like that's the goal, is improving quality of life. And Fadi Honain from Open Text spoke about some of the data for good activities that Open Text engages in. So I'll spare you other examples. The final thing that innovators can do is shape tech outcomes by building social and ethical considerations into their design process. So again, we've seen many examples of how various companies do that today. And one interesting point just for design teams, as opposed to looking at things from the corporate company level, is many well-known models for technology development. So you can think of waterfall and agile, focus on a very limited portion of the full innovation lifecycle. So they're looking at mainly design and quality assurance. But in the real world, we know technology doesn't stop existing once it's deployed. And for many members of the public, it only starts existing once it's deployed. And this is super relevant in smart cities work, where residents often see technology once it's out in the field and they're interacting with it for whatever its service-driven purpose is. So one crucially important thing is for technologists to extend their conception of the technology lifecycle to include things like ethical investment, inclusive hiring, consultation, which happened before the design process takes place, but also to consider things like novel use cases and user error, which might happen long after a product or service hits the market. And I know this was a very fast jam-packed presentation with lots to take in, so I'd love to invite you, if you just want to hit the next slide there, I'd love to invite you to read the full report. It's available on our website, ictc-ctic.ca. And please also feel welcome to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn or by email. Thanks very much from Fawn and I hope everyone has a great day. or evening, depending where you are.
Thank you, Mareed and Fawn, for the great overview of the ICTC's report on responsible innovation. And it's great to hear as well that it is published on your website. So if anyone's more interested in learning more, they can access it on the link that you shared, which is lovely. So, okay, so this brings us to the end of our Canada SCGN event. We hope that you have found this session interesting. For any follow-up with our speakers or to connect into the Canadian ecosystem more broadly, you're welcome to write to me at the email indicated on the slide. If you would like to join the SCGN community, and we encourage you to, you may visit their website to subscribe or direct any inquiries to the email that was shared on the slide. So if you have also dropped a question in the chat box that was unanswered, thanks for your interest. We are limited on time, so please do send your questions to the emails that we provided, and we'll pick them up from there. So in closing, we would like to thank each and every one of our distinguished speakers from Canada and Dubai for their invaluable contributions, and all of you who joined us at today's event. We wish you a great day ahead. Bonne journée.